In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. O heavenly King, Comforter, Spirit of truth, who art everywhere present and fillest all things, treasury of good gifts and giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us of all impurity, and save our souls, O good one. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right. Today we are talking about Patriarch Jacob. So, we talked about Abraham, and I brought this up at the end of the Abraham bit. Of the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Abraham, huge. Whole big swath of Genesis, all about Abraham. Jacob, huge. Huge big swath of the Old Testament, all about Jacob. Isaac is there in between them. No one talks about Isaac that much. And actually, I have a fascinating thing that I'm not going to I'll say stuff about Isaac today that I think is interesting, very plausible. I don't think it doesn't make sense, but it is based on the Talmud. So I'm not going to teach it as this is the thing, because it's from the Talmud, which was written partly post-Christianity Judaism, which was not always writing not in a way to counter Christianity. And so things about Isaac, that them dealing with why is Isaac so kind of just there and not, things like that. Anyway, we'll get into that shortly. But we pick up basically right after Abraham has passed away, and Isaac and Ishmael have buried Abraham at Hebron with his wife Sarah. And then we focus in on Isaac and his wife Rebekah. And we start out here with a prophecy that is given to Rebekah. So she's barren for a long time, and then she cries to the Lord, and the Lord acts on her. She and Isaac conceive, and she then has a very wildly difficult pregnancy. And at some point she's praying and going, what is happening? Why was I barren for so long only to now be enduring this pain? And the Lord appears to her and says, Rebekah, 2 nations are in your womb, and they are fighting, and they will be fighting nations. That's what's going to happen to them. And the older will serve the younger. Shortly after this, she gives birth, and out comes the first child. And we were told the first child was very hairy with a bright kind of red ginger hair. And so he gets named Esau, which is related to the word for red in Hebrew. But the second child's hand is actually grabbing his heel as Esau is coming out. And then the second child is born. And he's named Jacob, which is Hebrew for heel grabber, which is fun. But a heel grabber in Hebrew means a usurper. Someone who usurps someone else's authority and takes their place. And then the rest of Jacob's story is, or at least the way I'm going to frame it here, and I think this is what's set up at the beginning, we're going to compare and contrast these 2 children and what happens to Esau and Jacob. So, we're told that, well, first off, let's keep in mind, Esau is older, Jacob is younger, which means that Esau is the rightful inheritor of the birthright. And the birthright is effectively the full inheritance of the father's status as the head of this tribe. And so Esau is the rightful bearer of this birthright. Property inheritance is like stuff, but as far as what birthright really means, especially in this context, is that effectively he is Isaac's heir. So Abraham, who was given this promise of land, descendants, blessing. Isaac, Esau. That's the projected order of things. We are told that Esau was a hunter and that Jacob is a shepherd. I want to impress upon your mind, remembering, because we're in Genesis, previous things we've read in Genesis. The most famous shepherd up to this point in Genesis is Abel, the son of Adam and Eve, who was the righteous servant of God, who ends up getting murdered by his brother, which is not foreshadowing at all in Jacob and Esau's story. Esau is a hunter, and the most famous hunter up to this point is someone that no one ever remembers is from the Bible, but his name is Nimrod. And he's brought up in the earlier genealogies, and he's brought up in beautiful writing. And Nimrod was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Thus, people say, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord, which your English teacher will hate, but it got this person into the Bible. So I don't know, maybe you write like that and it works out for you. But Nimrod is one of these mighty men of old. And if we remember back, when we talk about the falls of man, he's one of the Nephilim. He's one of these mighty men of old who are consorting with demons and being given great strength. People you've definitely heard of that are like this: Hercules, Achilles, Gilgamesh, Hammurabi, like these kinds of figures. Another good one would be great, like a Xerxes or Darius, or all these giants. Giants is what the word Nephilim means. So there's one of these giants. So Nimrod is, you don't want to be compared to Nimrod. What I'm saying is you don't want to be compared to Nimrod. It's a consorting with demons kind of situation to be compared to Nimrod. So the fact that we are told that Esau is a hunter as his like defining characteristic is not a good thing for Esau. He's being compared to Nimrod. And thus being compared to this corrupted line. Now, the next stuff I'm going to chat about is, the next stuff I'm going to chat about a little bit is where I'm like, I read some Talmud stuff. So like, but like, here's so Isaac. We're told that Isaac is blind in his old age. And this becomes a major plot point that we'll get to here in a second. We're also told that Isaac loves Esau and Rebekah loves Jacob. And we're not told why Rebekah loves Jacob, but we are told that Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for game. And Esau's a hunter. And so Isaac loving Esau basically because Esau is a hunter. But Esau being a hunter is comparing him to this Nimrod, who's one of the Nephilim. That's not good. We're also told, so Esau actually ends up marrying 2 Canaanite women, which was like a big thing. Abraham's whole thing was like, Isaac cannot marry a Canaanite woman because our whole point is coming into this land is to not be Canaanites. Is our descendants, not the Canaanites, are the ones who are going to possess this land. And so Esau is this not righteous man. I mean, he's being compared to the Nephilim. He's marrying Canaanite women, which is like the thing he's not supposed to do. And we're told that Isaac is blind. And I thought one of the commentaries was really interesting. Isaac became blind from the smoke of the sacrifices of Esau's wives, was how they worded it. Meaning that whatever we mean by Isaac's blindness, whether we mean physical blindness or what we really mean is like he's like spiritually blind to the evil that is corrupting all this. Again, still not actually living in this promised land. He's living south at Beer Lahai Roy. It's this corruption that this mixing with the Canaanite, mixing with sacrifices to the gods of the nations, the fallen principalities. Isaac's not doing great. Isaac is not currently fulfilling his role as righteous patriarch very well. We see another instance of this is because for the third time we get a story about one of the patriarchs prostituting their wife to a foreign king, and it's Isaac. And so Isaac's not doing great. Esau's not doing great. He's pretty bad. Rebecca is like getting visions from the Lord. So she's not, she's doing fine. And her beloved is Jacob. Partly she has this prophecy. The older will serve the younger. Jacob is, despite Esau having the birthright, Jacob is kind of the one that's destined to be actually God's chosen. So, all that to be said, here's some stories about Jacob and Esau. One day, Esau was out hunting, again, like Nimrod, and he comes back unsuccessful at his hunting. The Lord has not blessed him with a successful hunt, and he is famished. And he's like actually starving. It's like actually really bad. He's not just like hungry. He's like weak and like starving. And he comes in, and Jacob has made some soup. And Esau comes in and says, "Give me some of the soup." And Jacob says, "I will sell you the soup." And Esau says, "Name your price." And Jacob says, "Sell me the birthright, and I'll give you this soup." And Esau immediately is like, "Deal." His specific words are, I at the door of death. What use to me is a birthright as a dead man? And yeah, Esau is dead in like the most meaningful sense of the word. Bodily, he's whatever. But he's in this position where he's unrighteous. He's like the Nephilim. He's consorting with demons. He is not the righteous one. The birthright really doesn't do him any good. He's actually not even wrong. Because, it's just like if one of us is baptized, but then we spend our whole life in sin, well, what use was our baptism to us? It's not doing anything for you if you are dead. The birthright is of no use to you. So he sells it. He's just, Jacob, you want it so bad? Freaking take it. I want physical life. He seeks after this physical life, not the blessing of Abraham, not the blessing of God, not the birthright that he has through his father Isaac, through Abraham, etc. And so Esau gives the birthright to Jacob. Unlikely that Isaac knows anything about this. Likely that Rebecca does. Likely that Rebecca does know about this because Jacob and Rebecca are super close. Later, Rebecca, Isaac tells Esau, go hunt, make me food, the kind of food that I really like, the product of your hunting, like Nimrod, the Nephilim, so that I can give you my blessing. And Rebecca overhears this. Rebecca knows, one, that God has told her that Jacob is the one who's going to get this, but also probably knows about Jacob's whole thing with the soup and how Jacob was seeking the birthright, which is this promise of effectively eternal life from God, and Esau sold it for soup. And they hatch this plot to get Isaac to bless Jacob instead of Esau. And this is where we remember Jacob's name, heel grabber, usurper. Effectively, one of the most famous things about Jacob is that he effectively deceives Isaac into blessing him instead of Esau. And the way this is understood is not, so John Chrysostom talks about this, not this specific passage, but the thing I'm about to talk about. And we talked about it a little bit with, when we were in the commandments, talking about lying. Jacob here isn't sinning by deceiving Isaac. He's actually, what he's doing is obeying his mother, who is doing her best to act in line with what God has promised her. God told her, Esau will serve Jacob. Well, that's only going to happen if Jacob gets the blessing, which technically is actually his by right because Esau sold this. If Esau were to accept the blessing from Isaac right now, Esau would actually be in the wrong because he sold the birthright. It's not his anymore. He gave it away. And so he would actually be in the wrong. Isaac does not know this, but Isaac is blind. So he can't know it. He fully, like, Isaac has this blindness, which is a spiritual blindness. I mean, the physical blindness is kind of like the symbol of this. And so they hatch this plot in order to effect the promise of God properly. It involves effectively deceiving Isaac, but not in a way that's like sinful. Like, this isn't Jacob and Rebekah sinning against Isaac and Esau. It's technically Rebekah making sure that Jacob actually gets the birthright that has actually been sold to him by Esau, as the Lord prophesied to her. And so I don't think the details are that important for our discussion, but they do a thing where Isaac blesses Jacob. It makes fun of Esau the whole time. He's like, oh, but if I go in there and offer my soup, which, fun fact, he's a shepherd, so he's making effectively like a lamb stew. And eating is always this like sign of communion. So there's like Eucharist stuff going in there, where the son offers lamb to the father and they eat and commune. Like, there's like that stuff going on. But also, Esau's really hairy. And so Jacob's like, what if he feels my skin and he realizes it's me because I'm not a gorilla? So Rebekah takes rabbit skin and ties like rabbit fur to Jacob. Like, no, yeah, like he was really hairy. And so like at one point Isaac like feels the rabbit skin, or he comes up and he goes, that's Jacob's voice, not Esau's voice. And Jacob's like, Father, I've brought the soup you asked for. And he goes, interesting. And he feels his hands and he goes, no, that's Esau. So this is bizarre. Esau is apparently this gorilla of a human, which is another sign that maybe there's something wrong with Esau. Not that I want to make fun of. It's not making fun of people who want to look different, but like if someone in the scriptures is described as inhumanly hairy, really, that's another sign that he's like the Nephilim. He's like this not really human in some meaningful sense way. Esau's got issues. He's animalistic, not humanistic. Anyway, Jacob gets the blessing. Shortly thereafter, Esau comes in and goes, hey, Father, I brought the soup. And he goes, what do you mean? And Esau's like, what do you mean? You asked for soup and I brought it. Give me the blessing. And that's when Isaac goes, we have been deceived. I have already given my blessing. And Esau's like, what do you mean? He goes, I gave the blessing. That's it. I can't like take it back. That's how blessings work. It's like a real ontological reality. And so Esau gets all upset, and Isaac's all upset. And finally Esau says, do you have only one blessing? And Isaac says, come, let me give you. And he gives him this kind of like weird backhanded blessing where he's like, yes, you will be a great nation. You will be at war. You will serve your brother. There's nothing either of us can do about that. But he does give him this quasi kind of like, no, but there is something about you that will be blessed and will be preserved. And later, way later, we'll talk about stuff with Esau and his descendants. So Esau's mad and he vows to kill his brother as soon as Isaac dies. Because he's like, well, Isaac won't let me because it's his dad and whatever. And so Rebekah goes to Jacob and says, you can't stay here. So she's going to send him up to Haran to her brother Laban. And what she tells Jacob is, go there for a few days, let Esau cool down. I'll send for you so you can come back once everything's kind of like simmered down. What she tells Isaac is, My life, I am tired of living because of Esau's Canaanite wives. Which is a fascinating way to describe disliking your daughter-in-law. I am tired of living, which is wild. Anyway, and she says, my son will not have a Canaanite wife. Apparently Esau doesn't count. I'm going to send him to Haran to get a wife. And Isaac is like, oh, I remember when I went to Haran and met your brother, and I got you as a wife. This sounds lovely. And he blesses Jacob and says, go, get a wife. And so Jacob gets up. And this begins kind of this thing that I want to talk about with Jacob. So Jacob's life is fascinating in structure. Jacob's got all this birthright stuff going on. Jacob now has the blessing. That's kind of our narrative arc that we finished here. Is compare and contrast Esau and Jacob, the unrighteous consorting with demons and the righteous, although needing to deceive demons. And there's some, I just want to keep hammering that like the deceit wasn't sinful. It's very typological to Christ, who comes in and deceives all the demons by clothing himself in humanity and kind of slipping under the radar. Like that's what Jacob's deceit is like. It's deceiving demons. That's not a bad thing to do. Anyway, Jacob's got birthright stuff going on. We establish, okay, you get the blessing. He goes and gets a wife from the right people and has all the kids, except for one, and then like gets the wealth and whatever. And then he returns to the land. So if we think about the three promises of Abraham, he was promised land, descendants, blessing. Well, Jacob gets the blessing from Abraham, which he will later pass on to the nations, the kids, the land. Okay, here we go. In between, the transitions are fascinating supernatural moments in Jacob's life. It's probably the two most famous passages about Jacob, other than Jacob having 12 sons and there being a whole musical about him. There's Jacob's ladder and wrestling with God. And those are like the journey narratives for Jacob. And I just find it fascinating. I don't have a lot to say as in like, I know why this does this. I just think, here's your three blessings, effectively, like showing up in typological things. And the transitions of place as he's in the land. Well, he's south of the land. Anyway, he travels through the land and out. And as he goes through the land, he has this radical encounter with the Lord. And as he's coming back, he has this radical encounter with the Lord. And so I'm going to describe those now. I'm going to describe the first one. So, blessing. Setting out. Jacob's ladder. This is a segment that I got from Father Stephen DeYoung, which he refers to as Father Stephen ruined Sunday school. But this is Sunday school. And so now I get to make it so it doesn't read. Jacob's ladder wasn't a ladder. And every picture of Jacob's ladder you've ever drawn where it's a wooden ladder is technically not the structure that's being described here. The word is, I should re-Google that. I think it's salal. I don't remember. Anyway, maybe the verb is halal. It's a ziggurat, effectively. So the ziggurat. So Eden is a garden, and the place where you encounter God, or the gods, but like God, and you encounter the gods because they're mocking God. Mountains, gardens. Everything's mountains and gardens, as far as the eye can see. Eden is described as a place where 4 rivers flow from it. Rivers flow downhill. Eden is being described as mountain and as garden. And this is called the mountain of the Lord. It's a thing. This will keep coming up, but just think mountains, gardens. The Tower of Babel was a bunch of humans building. You've seen like pictures of the Tower of Babel and how it's always this big spiral kind of thing going up. It's a mountain. It's humans trying to build a mountain to make a name for themselves. They're building a temple to themselves that stretches up into the heavens. So instead of building the mountain of God, like Adam and Eve were told to do, is go spread Eden, go spread the mountain of the Lord throughout the land. They build a mountain to humanity. And we're very lucky that humans have, ever since then, not tried to raise themselves up to gods and worship themselves and built, mountains to humanity. That definitely never happened again. So, we'll deal with that as we try to exalt ourselves. Here, Jacob sees the mountain of the Lord. Effectively, he's having a vision of Eden in some sense. He's having a vision of right worship. Now, remember, Esau's been doing this whole Canaanite thing, whatever. Jacob has a vision of effectively the divine heavenly liturgy with angels ascending and descending, in fact, going in and out of the presence of the Lord. And Christ is standing at the top of the ladder, and he comes and says, I am the God of Abraham and of your father Isaac. I bless you. I will give you the land. I will make your descendants like the stars, and your descendants will be a blessing. That Isaac gave the blessing, and Christ is correct. You get the blessing. So he's standing here at the top of the mountain of the Lord, looking down on Jacob, being like, go, be free, frolic, go get a wife. So that's the first of these major two big transition moments. So I'm going to talk about the middle part really briefly. He goes and he meets Rebecca's brother, Laban. Well, he meets Rachel, who is Laban's daughter. He goes there. You get kind of a reverse of earlier. So when Abraham sent someone over there, he asked for a drink of water, and Rebecca gave him a drink of water. And that's what here, Jacob gets to the well, and the people are like, we can't get to the thing because there's the big stone on the water, and we need other people, whatever. And then Rachel shows up, and he goes, "Oh, I'll get that door for you, babe." And he lifts the giant stone from the. It's a superhuman feat. And he gives water to Rachel and to her flocks. So you get this kind of water was given back. Again, wild typology. If you think about Fotini or Svetlana, the woman at the well, there's a lot of that going on when you get to John chapter 4. Go back and reread Jacob meets Rachel, and then reread John 4 whenever you and you'll see there's stuff going on. Anyway, he meets Laban. Fun fact, Laban sucks as an employer. If you have an employer like Laban, stop working for them like Jacob did. Anyway, he lives there for a month or whatever, and then Laban's like, you shouldn't work for me for free. What are your wages? What do you want? And he goes, I'll work for you for 7 years if I can marry your daughter Rachel. And he goes, yeah! And so Jacob works for 7 years, and then Laban basically tricks him into marrying his other daughter Leah first. And then Jacob's like, well, that wasn't very nice. And he's like, well, it's this thing we do where we don't marry the younger daughter off first. Yeah, you understand. Jacob goes, I guess I'll work for you another 7 years if I can marry Rachel. And Laban's like, well, of course, I'm a man of my word. Man of my word. You can absolutely work 7 years for Rachel. It's what I promised in the beginning. So he works for another 7 years, and he gets Rachel his wife. Anyway, he's now been here for 14 years. When Rebecca sent Jacob up here, her parting words were, go chill with Laban for a few days. I'll send for you when Esau kind of gets over this whole I'm going to kill you thing. Esau has not gotten over the whole I'm going to kill you thing. It's been 14 years, no word from Rebecca. Things are apparently still not good at home. So, next comes the sons of Jacob. So, you have Leah, you have Rachel. Rachel is the wife that Jacob actually loves, and Leah's also there. Which, all of this is a very big bummer for Leah. I feel so bad for Leah. She kind of becomes bitter and resentful over it. It kind of is not. Anyway, Leah has a child named Reuben. Leah has another child named Simeon. Leah has another child named Levi. Leah has another child named Judah. And then Rachel's all like, I'm the wife you actually love, and I have no children. So, shocker, she's like, I have this servant of mine. It's very Sarah and Hagar. I have a servant of mine. And so the servant Bilhah has a child for Jacob named Dan, and another child for Jacob named Naphtali. And then Leah's like, I have a servant too, and brings Zilpah, who is Leah's servant. And Zilpah has 2 children for Jacob. I get the feeling that Jacob is like, I don't know. It's not that he's like unwilling, whatever. It's not like Lot and his daughters. But like, Jacob very quickly becomes like the passive object in all of this. And it's literally just Leah and Rachel fighting. And it just keeps saying things like, well, and then Leah handed Zilpah to Isaac. And Zilpah conceived him. And so we get Gad and Asher from Zilpah. And then Leah has 2 more kids, Issachar and Zebulun. But like, it's this whole thing where like Rachel goes up to Leah and is like, hey, your kid dug up some really good mandrakes. I would love some of the mandrakes. And Leah's like, you stole my husband from me already. Are you here to take everything else away from me? And Rachel's like, I was just asking for a vegetable. This was not a personal attack. And then Leah says, no, I'll give you the mandrakes, but what will you give me in return? And Rachel says, I mean, you can even keep having kids with my husband. Who's also her husband? It's like a wild thing. Anyway, Leah has 2 more kids, Issachar and Zebulun. And then she has the one daughter named Dinah. And then Rachel finally has a kid named Joseph. And that's 11 sons and 1 daughter. And it stopped there for a while. And then we're going to get a 12th son way later. But one thing I want to bring up with all these people is that all of these sons have a name that means something, but also they're in a situation where the scripture kind of, like, it's nice when the scripture like interprets itself for you. And it tells you things like, well, because this happened, they called it this. Because, but it's so nice when it does that for you. Here's all the sons. Here's what their names mean. And here's how that relates to Jesus. Reuben's son means, behold, a son. Which, like, Leah. you couldn't do any better than that. But Christ, I mean, this happens to Christ multiple times. Behold, this is my beloved son. Reuben is the firstborn of Jacob, and Christ is the firstborn, the birthright receiver, of God the Father. Simeon, his name means something like he has heard or he's been listening. Christ is the Father's answer to all the prayers of Israel. Levi's name means something like he will join. He will join, or he will join himself. And Christ joins the church to himself. He is God bringing his people into union with him. Judah's name means thanksgiving. And Christ is the Eucharist. The sacrifice, the communal meal of the new covenant is the thanksgiving. Dan, his name means he has judged. Christ is the judge. One of his main missions is to come and judge the gods of the nations. Naphtali means my struggle, in the sense that my struggle, I have come through my struggle, I have attained victory. And that is Christ. Christ is the Father's answer to say, humanity has struggled, and now I will bring the man to struggle and to finally win. Gad, whose name means good fortune, which is something similar to the word evangelion. Although evangelion really means like victory announcement, but it is also this good fortune. This good fortune for us is that Christ has come. Asher's name means joy, and Christ is the beloved son in whom the Father is well pleased. He has joy. Issachar's name is fun. It kind of means 2 things. It means reward. But it means reward, but kind of like wages or like hired man, something like that. And there's like, God, again, so Leah was there. Her son had like dug up some good mandrakes, and Rachel was like, I want mandrakes. And she's like, well, what do you give me? And she says, well, if you give me mandrakes, then I won't interfere if you want to sleep with my husband, who's also whatever. And so Leah, the first child after that is Issachar, whose name means something like I bought him or hired man, wages, reward, payment, which is a terrible thing to name your child. It's wild. We've gone from husbands prostituting wives to wives prostituting the other wives. madness in the house of Jacob. Issachar, fun fact, is also when I was in the musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, I was Issachar, and now I don't know how to feel about that. So that's fine. Zebulun is this next child, and his name means endowment. Paying an endowment like an investment sort of thing. It also seems to be related to the word for north. Fun fact, Zebulun is one of the most northern tribes. Not the most, but one of the most northern. And Christ is the endowment of Israel. Christ is this, like, all of humanity is kind of spending all this time investing and investing in righteousness to produce eventually the Theotokos, who will produce Christ. I didn't talk about Christ being related to the name of Issachar. Christ pays the wages of sins, which is death. He is that ransom. All right, then you get Joseph, Rachel's first wife. Rachel's first son. Joseph's name means adding, like he's adding things. And she actually says, I have been mocked and I've been despised and all these things. And so I will name my child Joseph, for the Lord, surely the Lord will add to me one more son. And Christ is the one more son of Israel. That one last child, who's also the firstborn, which is a fun thing to think about. I find it interesting that, again, Joseph, this prophecy of one more son will be given to me, which means Benjamin. We'll get to Benjamin, but it also it means Christ. Rachel was seen in a lot of ways, among all the patriarchs and matriarchs and kings, things like that, as a special intercessor for Israel. Because Rachel was the wife of Jacob, which means all the 12 tribes of Jacob, even though she didn't give birth to all 12 of the sons, she's the mother of all 12 tribes of Israel. So she was kind of this special patron for Israel. And she's actually brought up right after the birth of Christ. When it's the slaughter of the innocents, she's referred to as it's Rachel weeping for her children. Not a metaphor, not just a fun phrase. It's literally referred to like Rachel as intercessor for all of Israel is weeping and interceding on behalf of all the sons of Israel. And these sorts of things. So Rachel's really cool. Christ is this added son. Also Benjamin, it's fine, we'll get to Benjamin. But he's not born for another long time. We're at 11 sons. And then Dinah, I'll bring up Dinah. Dinah's name means vindicated, or they got vengeance for her. And if that's not foreshadowing, I don't know what is. So at this point, Jacob has been working for Laban for 20 years. 7 years for one wife, 7 years for another wife, 6 years for sheep. I'm not going to talk about the sheep thing because I just don't have time and there's too much. Jacob does so Laban has been deceiving and maltreating Jacob this whole time. He tricked him into marrying, effectively tricked him into polygamy, kind of. But effectively tricked him into marrying the wrong person. We are told by Jacob, quote, that Laban has changed his wages 10 times. I don't know what the reference for that is, because there's not like 10 different instances of them talking about wages. But Laban has been maltreating Jacob for 20 years. And Jacob finally gets sick of it. And he does another Jacob deceives a demon guy thing again. And we're told that Laban is no longer friendly towards the house of Israel. And so he deceives him in some way. Basically, he, through entirely legal and technically breaks no rules ways, manipulates the flocks of sheep in order that he would have a lot of wealth from the sheep, and Laban wouldn't. And Jacob frames it as, and I think we're supposed to believe that he's not lying here. Jacob frames it as, I'm just getting just wages out of you. If you're not going to give me just wages, God will. And he has a vision of Christ basically telling him to do this. So like all this stuff. Jacob gets just wages for his 20 years of masterful work with the flocks and devoted devotion to Laban, despite Laban being terrible to him. Anyway, Jacob flees in the middle of the night with all of his stuff. And the interesting thing is that Rachel steals the idols out of... So Laban also an idolater. Anyway, Rachel steals the idols out of Laban's house and takes them with her. This becomes an issue when Laban finds out his idols have been stolen, along with his daughters and sheep that he's going to claim, but he has no right to because he made the deal, and all these things. Anyway, Laban runs after Jacob. He has a vision where Jesus tells him, do not speak either good or evil to Jacob. He goes up to Jacob. They make a covenant where they agree not to kill each other. And Laban demands his gods back. And Jacob doesn't know that the gods have been stolen by Rachel. Rachel deceives her father, and Laban never gets the gods back. And it's the whole mess of a situation. But anyway, make a covenant. We're not going to kill each other. Jacob is now heading back to the land. Jacob is going to have another wild supernatural experience. First off, right after his covenant with Laban, he just meets some angels for like a verse. And that's it. And the angels of the Lord were there, and they spoke together, and he said, this is the camp of God. And then we don't ever bring that up again. He sends the messengers to Esau. Esau feels like Esau's going to kill him. I mean, it's been 20 years, but Esau's not gotten over this. Jacob starts sending gifts. He's going to send tons and tons of gifts to Esau. The important thing here is that at some point he spends the night, and it says, and he wrestled with a man all night long, and towards morning, the man handicaps him by injuring his hip. And he says, do not depart from me, whatever. And this man, the angel of the Lord, who is Jesus, says, I'm giving you a new name. Your name was Jacob. Your name is now Israel. And the name Israel means something like fights with God or God is victorious. Because of how Hebrew names work, it can go kind of either way. And those are both fascinating titles to give Jacob. God wins, but Israel fights with God. And if you know anything about the rest of the Old Testament that we'll talk about in the coming weeks, you're like, wow, fights with God is the best name you could ever have called this. That is their whole identity. And then Jacob says, now Israel says, but you can't leave until I know your name. And it's fascinating because the man responds, you don't get to ask me what my name is. And then he just zips. And it's like this bizarre moment of, if you know about Moses coming up, then we'll talk. It's good. But it's this interesting moment if you don't know what happens in the rest of the Old Testament. He comes out and says, you have a new name, it's Israel. It means fights with God. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You just wrestled with God. Anyway. And then Jacob goes, but what's your name? And he goes, oh, I'm not taking follow-up questions. And then he bolts. Anyway, Jacob meets Esau. Esau does not kill him. Esau forgives him. They fight over who's going to give the most gifts. It's great. Anyway, Esau keeps saying, hey, you can come back and live with me. And Jacob goes, no, I have to go somewhere else. And they fight. Anyway, eventually he gets Esau to just go back to wherever you're living. And Jacob moves to Shechem. He moves into the Holy Land. He moves into the actual Holy Land. And then here's this last little bit here. He moves to Shechem, and he lives in a tent, and he builds an altar. He is doing the Abraham things. If by the Abraham things we mean what Abraham does when Abraham's doing the right thing, is living in the land, building altars to God. And this living in a tent is really important, and I'm going to punt that to a future lecture because I don't have time right now. You get this interesting moment where, so Shechem's a place, it's also a guy who falls in love with Dinah. He ends up sleeping with Dinah. It is not clear how consensual it is. Anyway, everyone's appalled because they're not married. And basically, Shechem's dad comes and says, look, my son is just crazy for your daughter. Name your price, but let my son marry your daughter. And the response is, be circumcised. She cannot marry someone who's outside of this whole covenant thing. We did that whole thing with Esau, having all these Canaanite wives. What? No. The things. So they do. They agree to it. And that should have been the end of that great story where something terrible happened, but God was able to bring good out of it and was able to bring people into this blessing, the promise of land. Like, these people are going to become part of the house of Abraham. And then Simeon and Levi screw that up by taking advantage of the fact that all of the able-bodied men among Shechem's people are in great pain and not up to fighting. And Simeon and Levi go through and slaughter all of them. And they go back, basically, and they tell their dad, hey, we just killed all the Shechemites. We vindicated your daughter Dinah, whose name means she gets vindicated. That's pretty cool. And Jacob was like, you've done a horrible thing. You have made me hateful to all of our neighbors who are powerful, and they will kill us. You cannot do things like that. But even worse, what they've done is they've killed their brothers. I mean, this is their literal brother-in-law at this point, and but they've killed people who were part of the covenant. Like, this was not going into Canaan and removing the Nephilim or going, this wasn't concrete demons. This was someone did a bad thing, but then effectively, in some sense, repents of it and joins the covenant. And then Simeon and Levi kill them. And that's not good. Next big episode that happens is they move to Bethel. Rachel has her last son, and she names him Ben-Oni, who means son of my pain. And she dies in childbirth. Jacob decides not to call him Ben-Oni and just changes his name to Benjamin, son of my right hand, which can also mean something like son of the south. Later, I'll talk about north and south and Zebulun and Benjamin, get to that later. But just know that two of the kids are basically kind of named north and south. And Benjamin's name is just all over the place. Son of my pain, son of my right hand, which means like my authority, but also son of the south. There's a lot going on there. Also, weird power move for your wife to die in childbirth and for you to immediately just be like, I know she wanted the kid to be named this one thing, but I'm going to change it. Weird power move on Jacob's part. I don't want to do that. Anyway, Rachel gets buried at Bethel. Bethel is where Jacob had the Jacob's ladder vision, which really is ziggurat, but it's fine. That was Bethel. So that's where actually Rachel's final son is born, son of my right hand. And that's at Bethel where Jacob had this first major encounter with the mountain of the Lord and Christ giving him the blessings. And then the last thing to chat about real quick is that Jacob actually ends up going up to Hebron at the end of Isaac's life. Isaac passes away. And just like Abraham passed away and his two sons buried him at Hebron with his wife Sarah, Isaac passes away at Hebron. And then Jacob and Esau meet there to bury their father with Abraham. And then, just like right after that, Ishmael moves down to the south to Havilah. And then Isaac went to Beer Lahai Roi. I mean, he didn't stay in the Holy Land, but whatever. Esau moves to the southeast. Esau also has a name change, vaguely kind of. He's also called Edom. It's not as important. Just know he moves to the land of Edom, which is named after him. And throughout the rest of everything, the Edomites, who show up all the time, they're Esau's kids. They're Esau's descendants. So they're this nation that has to serve Israel in some sense, used to be the people who should have had the birthright. They're a little bit interesting. They kind of worship the God of Abraham, but also they've got this mixture of Canaanite stuff going on. There's a lot going on with the Edomites. They'll show up periodically. But they're not, the noteworthy thing is that they're not Nephilim. They're Edomites. They're like the Ishmaelites. They're Abrahamic in some sense. They've got a different relationship to Israel than, say, like the Amalekites or something like that. Esau moves down to Edom, and Jacob stays in the Holy Land. And the very next sentence is, when Joseph was 18, or etc., and then we'll jump into Joseph's story. The next thing. So, to recap again, all the blessing stuff in the birthright, vision of Christ, the descendants thing, lots of sons, vision and physical experience with Christ, and then possessing the land. And that's kind of Jacob's thing, to grossly oversimplify Jacob in an hour. Questions, thoughts, feelings, concerns, complaints, things people thought were cool. No? Cool. Right. What you're saying is I explained it all perfectly.